open session, and I'd like to report out on the closed session items. With regards to item 4A, the personnel summary was approved in closed session, and a copy is available at the back of the room. Items 4B1, 4C, and 4D were discussed in closed session and will be approved as part of the consent agenda, items 16D, E, and P. Public comment on the consent agenda. Is there any comment on the consent agenda?
Yes.
This is the consent agenda.
I'd like to ask that you remove from the consent agenda.
I can't hear you.
My
That's
name is
better.
Laura Effel.
Thank you.
I live in Larkspur.
Okay.
I'm requesting that certain items be removed from the consent agenda,
Okay.
specifically 16G, H, I, J, K, and N.
N as in Nancy?
Yes.
Okay. So we have item 16G, H, I, J, K, and N as in Nancy will be removed from the consent agenda. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. Okay. Do we have any other requests from fellow board members or anyone in the public that would like to have anything removed from the consent agenda for comment or discussion during the open session?
Laura?
Yeah, I hear you, and I don't have anything to request to remove. I'm good.
I believe that I sent a note to Mary with a minor change to the meeting minutes, and I'm looking for which one that is here. All of a sudden, it's not popping out at me. Okay, item 16A, we'll just make note, and these have been revised, but I will pull that just to make note of that. Okay, thank you very much. And you did as well. I do want to open it up. I understand from the superintendent that when it comes to removing things from the consent agenda for discussion by the board or public comment specific to those items, it's up to the board whether we do that. Does anyone object to any of those items being pulled from the consent agenda so it would allow for public comment and potentially board members to discuss? Would you like me to, do you have the list in front of you, Barbara? Do you want me to read to you what they are?
Could you read them again, please? 'Cause I
Yes.
didn't catch them.
So we would have 16G, and that's the approve the contract for the CFO. Item H would be approve amended contract for Assistant Superintendent Educational Services. Item I, approve amended contract for Assistant Superintendent Human Resources. Item J is approval of the public disclosure and tentative agreement between the CSEA and management. And item K is approve the 2017-18 revised CSEA and confidential employee salary schedules. Thank you, Mary. And also N, approve the MOU with Gary Federoff for counseling at San Andreas High School.
It's okay with me. I don't have any objections.
Okay, Barbara, do you have any objections? Chuck, do you have any objections? Laura, could you hear me on the phone? What I was just saying?
I heard you. I just wanted clarification. We're pulling N for trustee, the San Andreas High School, Gary Federoff.
Yes,
also?
yes. And I did say that.
So we've got A, G, H, I, J, K, and N pulled?
Correct.
Yes, I got it.
You don't object to those being pulled?
I do not.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll go ahead and pull that. Thank you. I also do not object. Thank you. I'm just getting back to my place here. So now I'd like to ask for approval of the consent agenda with items 16A, G, H, I, J, K, N as in Nancy removed. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
This is a roll call vote, Mary.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Mr.
Ford,
Aye.
Mr. Butterman,
Aye.
Ms. Harlander.
Aye. That's a lot easier, isn't it? Thank you. Now I'm going to ask for approval of our regular agenda, including time limits. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. That carried. So now is the time of our meeting that if any trustees has anything that you want to share with other trustees, since we never get a chance to or allowed to speak together, all five, if there's anything that anyone needs to share with other trustees, now's the time to do so. And I think I'm looking at, I might let Barbara go first based on her.
I do.
Barbara?
Oh, sorry.
Use the microphone.
I
Would
do want
you-
to comment on conversations I've had with Robert Turk at CSBA regarding policies and procedures on some things. And I think, again, I'm very impressed with the work the CSBA has been doing in support of the kinds of work that we are doing, and that we have a relationship with them that is, people are picking up the phone and giving us some, I think, some very good thoughts there, and that, and I think we are participating with them and providing them with some useful information. With that, I have been out and about in the community. I've spoken with many employees and community members, and what I'm hearing is volunteering, certainly supportive comments about their children's life here, what's going on at school, what they're anticipating, any concerns. Employees seem to be ready to go, and I credit those of you out there for giving them the motivation to get back to the work at hand, to get back to the teaching and learning that I'm hearing, that they feel renewed and recommitted to be able to do the work. And I hope that we're going to continue to do the work we've done for many, many years, which is to support our students with the qualified candidates and teachers and staff that we've hired to make it work, because it's showing everywhere. And that, of course, includes classified and all the groundskeeping, of course, that goes on with great intensity now as well. So, and thank you. That's all I have to say.
Anything else for board members? That we, other,
Laura, can you hear me? I don't know. Can't tell if I'm jumping ahead of anybody. Go ahead. Can you hear me?
Yes.
yes, thank you, Laura, we can hear
Okay.
you.
I just wanted to mention briefly that I helped mail out 3,000 booklets, the Community of Concern mailing. It goes out to all ninth graders in Marin County, not just those in our district, all incoming ninth graders, and it's a booklet, a parent's guide for prevention of alcohol, tobacco, and other drug use. And I think, I'm hoping that all of you board members got a copy of what was sent out to all of our students in the TAM Union, as well as all ninth graders in public schools in Marin County. It's a great booklet for parents, a really good resource for all families. So I don't know if that's in your little folder, but
Thank you.
that's what I did one morning, August 6th.
Oh, looks like we did get it. Thank you. Looks very helpful. Chuck, do you have anything you need to share, or Michael with the other board members?
I'm just going to make an observation, because I know you board members, you know we get this. We get a lot of unsolicited emails from various people around the country who are looking to make money, provide services or products to school districts, and just generally I scan and throw them away and, delete them. But there's this strain of emails that we're getting this year that I don't recall getting before, that all have to do with companies in this country that are selling security services to school districts. And what I think very much playing on sort of the fears that have been, and I would say stoking the fears related to school violence. And so it's becoming in and of itself, it's an interesting phenomenon to see how this in and of itself becomes an industry. And we're going to see a lot more of it. So it's, you guys don't see these emails that we see, but it's a very interesting phenomenon, and it hasn't been lost.
No, I've noticed that too. Thank you. I also don't have anything that's noteworthy to share with my fellow trustees regarding board business, so I think we'll move on to the superintendent's report. As we all know, that's going to change very quickly within a week. So our schedules ramp up again.
Yes, and off of that, it's been really exciting to see staff coming back. Walt and I met with the entire management team, with Lars and Tara facilitating that meeting. It was really refreshing to see everyone back in fairly positive spirits, hearing some serious news about, we need to be working with you this year with the budget. But it was really wonderful to meet everyone and to feel welcomed. And then the only other thing I'll report on, there were several meetings with cabinet, parents. We had a meeting with David Sondheim, the assistant principal, and Morrison Larkspur City Council, Safe Routes to Schools representatives, and myself to discuss the progress and strategies for dealing with the concerns coming from the residents in the marina regarding the parking and traffic problems in the marina as a result of the student and parent use of the marina. And it was a really productive meeting with some good ideas and suggestions coming out of that, and I'll be giving you an update. David is looking at changing some things in relation to parking to respond to some of the concerns and suggestions that we all had during that meeting. So I look forward to giving you an update on that in the next
Thank
few
you.
days.
Thank you very much. So the next part of the agenda is the trustee considerations. And I do realize that I did want to make note a little bit earlier, was that our agenda, to my fellow trustees, we are trying different formats for the agenda to be more streamlined and to be able to hit a lot of the work we need to do earlier on into the agenda. And since this is a short meeting anyway, the public comment will be further after trustee considerations. I forgot to mention that to you. That was something the superintendents suggested we try this meeting since we needed to get through the considerations. So the next item is the Teaching and Learning Counseling Enriched Classroom, CEC. And
Now I'm going to introduce Tara and Corbett to give you an update on this program. And just so you note the difference in the agenda, you had focus on board goals. Teaching and learning is a board goal as well as an LCAP goal. So you'll see us aligning the presentation. We also talked about having program presentations or student presentations. We don't have teachers or students back right now, so we have a program presentation that aligns with the goal of teaching and learning goals.
very good.
Tara,
Thank you.
Corbett.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
And I believe, do we have a copy of one of these in the packet? Which part do we have? No. Okay.
No, this is just an update.
Okay, so I might have to ask you to go stop on occasion? Thank you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. As we said, Corbett and I are here to give you an update on the counseling enriched classroom that started in 1 year ago exactly at Tamalpais. So we wanted to give you a little bit of background and timeline on how we came to develop the idea of the CEC. So in 2012, the California law changed, requiring districts to provide mental health services to special education students. Part of the change in this law shifted the full responsibility for non-public school placement onto districts. Prior to that, districts and county office used to share the cost, with the county offices picking up everything that was not educational based. So that was a major shift in law, and it was a shift in, we got a few more dollars with it, but not enough to make up for it at that time. And when we did our analysis around how that's gonna impact us at the time, we anticipated about a 300% increase in non-public school placement costs to the district over the next 5 to 7 years. And we were almost dead on with that. So we knew that was coming. What we didn't know is that also, from that point on, non-public school placements have continued to increase in cost. We had the ABLE report, which showed us some of those significant increase in non-public school placement costs. So with the shift in that law, we took on a greater responsibility, particularly for the emotional support for students. In 2016, we had the special ed audit by the ABLE group, and one of their number one recommendation was to research ways to reduce that non-public school expense to the district. So with that, our special education staff, Amira and Wes, explored options, and what they came up with was to develop a program to serve 10 to 15 students who were our students, who were currently placed in non-public schools, who they believed with a higher service of care in our district, we could serve them. So the plan for the what they call the CEC, or the Counseling Enriched Classroom, was developed out of that. Amira and Wes used real students to estimate the cost savings, and that plan was developed fairly quickly, and in the spring of 2017, the plan was brought forward to the board for approval. The plan was also developed with Corbett, because the idea was to create a school on a small site to deal with specifically and to provide services to a specific type of student who needed a smaller environment for higher emotional support needs. So the small school CEC opened in August of 27 with 12 students. It's located at Tamalpais. And this year, in August, it will expand to serve 15 students. So the program, essentially, as I said, is to serve students who have a higher emotional support need than we can accommodate on our regular sites. That's dependent on the specific needs of the students. These students are, they have emotional needs, not necessarily learning disabilities, so that's a slight difference. One of the biggest goals for us with part of this program was to provide a local option for our students so that they could be home. So for many of these students, if we don't have this option, that means they have to live away from home, which is another layer, of anxiety. So the fact that we can serve these families within their home district is a big win for us. And on top of that, it saves us money. The CEC is staffed with 1.2, well, for the first year it was 1.0 FTE special education. We're going to expand this year by 0.2 to accommodate more students. We have a 1.0 psychologist who is there full-time to support the students. And then we have 1.75 para-educators who are also there to support the students and the teacher in the classroom. So we have very small student to adult ratios in the classroom. As we said, it's located on a small school site to accommodate the specific needs. Many of the students have flexible schedules. Some of them may have needs to not be around large numbers of people at the same time. And with this small environment and being at a small school, we're able to accommodate many different variations of schedules and different individualized education plans for those needs. And there's also some small group instruction, mostly around math.
Just briefly, thank you. Just touch on a personal note. I would encourage you to come check it out someday. It's a wonderful atmosphere. The special ed teacher, Sean McCormick, the psychologist, Kimberly Lowenthal, Shamila, and Nate, the paraeducators, did a tremendous job working with Amira to provide such a great personalized environment. So from a parent point of view, from a principal point of view, it's a wonderful environment and a great model, as Tara mentioned, for families to have their child close to home. Briefly, just running down the financial aspect of things, this is actually something that you saw in spring of 2017 when Amira and Wes proposed this. Yes, the first two columns, the third one is an addition. Just breaks down the breakdown of the costs of the program and the savings that come from that. On the top, you'll just see, as Tara mentioned, the cost of the full-time teacher, the two paraeducators, the psychologist that also has some site responsibilities beyond the CAC. In that first year on the left column, we also had one-time costs. We had to build a portable, we had to have infrastructure, we had to purchase furniture. So that was one-time costs that offset the savings down the road. But if you look at the more maroon color, total current as-is costs, the $1 million, that is the savings that's derived from not having to pay tuition to these MPS schools. That is large. So that's where the real savings come from, not having to pay the tuition. So if you subtract off the costs up above, if you go to the very bottom line, the blue line, those are the savings. So in year one, just under $400,000. That's an estimate. We're still confirming that as we're closing out the finances from this past year. But that escalates to roughly $550,000 projected for this upcoming year. The additional savings, again, are because we're not having to pay for the one-time costs of the furniture and the portable. And we're projecting similar savings coming up for this upcoming year. So I just want to break that down a little bit. Again, something you've seen, and we project the savings to be similar this upcoming year. So next steps, we are having conversations given that our special ed population is growing and the costs for MPS placements continue to grow. How can we take advantage of these savings, and given it's such a win for the families, a win for the staff, and also offsets our financial situation. So we've been starting conversations with Amira and Wes about what opportunities are there in the district to expand that, to keep students closer to home in their community, taught by their fellow staff and their peers. So we're looking at some additional opportunities, maybe potentially as soon as this year. We don't want to commit to that, but maybe something sooner. Amira says there's a need for that. And maybe not necessarily at a small site. There might be something within a school site existing where we can create space. So, Tara, anything you want to add?
Any questions from the board? For
Is
Tara?
that the 1920 projected savings amount, that is that pretty much flatten out? Can we expect that that's the range that will continue with this program then?
It's assuming all the same assumptions moving forward. Cost of salary obviously can be variable. It's an estimate of what the NPS cost would be. Wes and Amira took a sample size that's pretty objective. So obviously that will vary on the particular kids that come back, the particular costs, but they pulled actual warrants and costs from MPS placements in the past when they built this and presented it 2 years ago.
Go ahead.
How many of this year's 15 students are returning students?
I can speak from my personal experience off the top of my head. Don't hold me to this, but of the 15 returning, I predict 9 or 10 potentially. Don't hold me to that, but that's my mental recollection of who the students are. And obviously, more new students are coming in, and I believe.
We did graduate, I think, about 4.
Mm-hmm.
About 4 kids graduated.
And I believe we're starting to have a wait list already.
And I think one comment.
Okay, for the board.
Historically, community mental health used to make the placements. And the shift to schools was really a runaround of Prop 98. It's to shift more cost onto the schools and less on and less on the rest of the state. Another big change was that when community mental health made those placements, they made the placements, and cost was a consideration. So now when we have these out of, non-public school placements, cost is no longer a consideration, because we don't get, we who are allowing these placements have no voice in determining where the placement is going to be made or what the cost is.
We do have some. I mean, it has to be an accredited institution that can meet the needs of the student. But what you're right is that we don't necessarily have a say over how much they choose to charge and how much they choose to increase their cost, cost to us every year.
The community mental health wasn't making the kind of placements to Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, to the extent that they're being made now.
Yeah, I don't have that data to compare to, so.
I think this came up during the previous discussion when we were close to adopting the budget. The forecast for the NPS students that we look at that are coming into the district and looking at the feeders, and that's always a challenge. And that I think there was a blip that was seen. I think it was just actually this next year, and then I think it was a steeper rise, and then the curve, it was more of a steady increase. But how far down do you go into the middle schools to have a forecast of not just the special ed, but the NPS?
3 years? About 3 years.
So you do go, okay.
Yeah, that's like,
Okay.
yeah, we know that not this year, but next year, we have, because we're part of the SELPA, we have an idea.
So you
of-
do, okay, so that's how you track it, okay. Thank you. I'm sorry, I just jumped ahead. Michael, do you have a question
Yeah, I've
still?
got a couple of questions. So, Corbett, you mentioned that either there is or there's likely to be a waiting list for the C class this year, but I know that towards the end of last year, we accepted some students from other districts.
We accepted one.
I know that there was a revenue stream, we were getting paid associated with that. So how do you, if we have a waiting list, does that mean, are we giving priority to our students of our district is that our policy, and then we accept somebody else from another district only if there's an open slot? Or is it some other policy?
Yeah, why don't you explain how that works?
We'll see how that goes.
I didn't want to just nod from the audience. Yes, our students get priority, but if we've already accepted a student from outside the district who is paying for that, we don't remove them from placement when we wait for some attrition or a student to move out before we accept the students. And we do our best to keep those students who are waiting in our other CEC classes or on hold in their NPS placement until we can bring them in. But our students always get first placement.
So what is you talk about opening potentially new classrooms. I know that Lars has done such a fabulous job that we have nothing but space right now at our other campuses. But what do we do about shared services, right? Is it possible to open up a shared CEC, class in Novato or San Rafael, for example, and staff it in that manner as opposed to continuing to open these in our district?
So, you're talking economy of scale, and we do that with a lot of our special ed, special day classes for for various student populations. So our students with multiple disabilities or orthopedic impairments, and those are shared by the SELPA. Once we open it up to an agreement with other districts within the SELPA, then we go into the basically the cost sharing model of the SELPA. So if we have enough students to own it or fill it, then it behooves us to run it ourselves, hire our own staff, and then we don't end up having to share the cost because we pay. We've gone over some of this with just the special ed funding. We end up paying, in my opinion, and I think that's borne out in the numbers, a disproportionate cost or bearing a disproportionate burden of SELPA programs. Sometimes that's necessary because we don't have enough students with the same particular needs to fill a classroom, so it doesn't make sense for us to hire a teacher and an aide for one or two kids, and so we share that cost with the SELPA. But if we have enough students to fill a CEC class, it's more cost effective for us to hire our own people and run that program. Does that make sense? We go into that cost sharing agreement. If we open it up, it can't just be with the existing SELPA rules. We can't just have kind of a side deal with our high school counterparts in Novato and San Rafael and open it without joining the SELPA cost sharing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do these numbers, the costs, include pension contributions?
I'll read that up to.
Isn't that total compensation?
My understanding was total compensation, those numbers, so those numbers on the top line are total compensation, salary and benefits.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
So,
That number reflects, that salary number and benefit number reflects a first-year teacher. That the young man, he'll be a second-year teacher, next week, but that
Okay.
reflects a first-year.
I want to pause for a moment. Laura, do you have any questions on this item? And I just realized you can't see the screen, can you?
I can't see, obviously, whatever is up on the screen that Corbett was describing. What is happening in 1920? We're anticipating 15 students, and what was the bottom line savings estimate for 1920?
It's the same. They're assuming that it's the same with the same assumptions.
And
For 1890.
579,
553.
553.
Yeah.
563. Okay, so my only comment is, this is terrific. I think it is a great win-win solution for families and the district. And the cost, the savings, when we looked at this before it was implemented, was about $500,000 a year. We were guessing, and so it's great when we put our best guess forward and it actually comes out a little bit higher. So I'm really pleased that we have this going on. Thank you so much.
Any other comments from the board before I ask if there's a public comment on this item? Is there any public comment on this item, teaching and learning, counseling enriched?
May I add something?
And yes, you can.
I just want to congratulate the staff here tonight for putting this program together. I believe it's a first in Marin, am I correct? Then congratulations and thanks for tooting our own horns about that. Good job.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll move on. The next item, I believe it's Tamalpais, first reading of new board policy. And let's see, it's administration record 5141.52. I don't have the board policy number smack in front of me. Suicide prevention and mental health promotion.
This is a standard policy now, recommended and reviewed by the California School Boards Association before it comes to us. The BP is pretty much identical to what the California School Boards Association has recommended, as is the AR. There are a few things added in postvention that we currently do in the AR.
So I'll hand it to you, Wes. I know I didn't have any questions.
Yeah, I don't know that I would add much more than what
Okay.
Valerie said, but it follows the state model policy and the California School Board Association model that we took it from. Yeah.
Could I add a little more history? About 6 years ago at State SARP, where we had the opportunity when the money came in to start working on mental health projects, we worked less with the bulk of the language that you provided and all the work that you did, and that was statewide. And now we have it statewide. And again, I want to thank you and this district because 10, 15 years ago, Tara, maybe you can help me with this because you were the teacher. One of our students started the initiative for the suicide prevention barrier out of Redwood High School in the service learning class. She and her father started that initiative, and she also, with Tara's support, developed the first student peer resource curriculum for suicide prevention here. So I want people to know all the work that you have done based on the work that's been already done here. It's been very important for students' lives across the state, up and down. So thank you again.
You're very welcome. Had strong support from our psychs and counselors and the people that we contract with, BACR, trying to keep our kids safe.
Laura, do you have any question about the first reading?
I don't. I'm just glad that the language is in both the board policy and the AR talks about not only students, particularly the post-suspension element of these documents, talks about all staff, everyone involved when a suicide happens. We all need support. So I'm very happy to see a lot of language in both these about all human beings involved when something tragic happens like this.
Thank you. Pardon me? Okay. We're not taking any action tonight on this. It's just the first reading, but also if we have any public comment, you're welcome to do so at this time on this item. Okay, we'll move on to the next, which is Valerie Pitt's first reading of new BPAR 5145.13 Immigration Enforcement.
And I think we've provided background in terms of how this comes to us as well. It's now a requirement, Education Code 34.7, that we are mandated to adopt policy consistent with the California Attorney General's model policy limiting assistance with immigration enforcement at public schools. As we mentioned earlier, the California School Boards Association vets these and develops samples for us that have been vetted legally, and that's exactly what you see in your packet tonight. There are very few, if any, changes that we made as a district, intending to keep this broad in general. We do not have a lot of experience with this. We haven't had, to my knowledge, any issues with immigration enforcement officials showing up at our school sites. So this is the policy as recommended by CSBA.
Any board members have a comment or a question for the other board members?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
So the purpose of this policy is obviously focused on the district's responsibilities with respect to immigration-related matters. If I'm looking at the AR 5145.13, and there's a paragraph on the first page that says, keep going.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks.
Sorry, it says, Laura, Mary has put the proposed policy up on the board.
I'm with you.
Okay.
I'm with you.
Got it. So it says, there's a paragraph about 3/4 of the way down that says, resources and data collected by the district shall not be used directly or by others to compile a list, registry, or database of individuals based on national origin, immigration status, religion, or other category of individual characteristics protected against unlawful discrimination. And it cites the government code section. I think that's too broad. I think it's not well drafted. Because we do, in fact, collect data of students that includes their ethnicities and national origin, those kinds of and we use that for all kinds of purposes, including reporting on test scores and other kinds of information. What the government code says is you can't do that for law enforcement or immigration purposes. And that makes sense, because that's the purpose of this. The purpose of this policy, which is saying we don't collect this data, is we don't collect it for law enforcement and immigration purposes, but we do, literally, we do collect this data for other purposes. And so I would advise, I believe that this particular paragraph is not well drafted by omitting mention of for law enforcement or immigration purposes, which is in fact in the statute that's cited there, but it's missing here. So I would revise this at the end of after where it says for unlawful discrimination, so that we are adding the portion of the statute that ties it back to law enforcement or immigration purposes. So we would add the phrase at the end, discrimination, comma, quote, for law enforcement or immigration purposes, period, close quote. And that makes it clear. Otherwise, we're adopting a policy that says we're not collecting this data when we are collecting this data, and we're doing so properly.
Did you get that, Mary? Okay, I did too, but we'll make sure. Thank you. I think that's a good comment.
Is that also, Michael, is that also on the board's policy?
No, the board policy is much more general and doesn't, I reviewed the board policy and I don't think it contains the same, it doesn't get down to the same level of specificity, and so I don't think it has the same problem.
Laura, do you have any comments?
No, I'm just scanning that board policy, making sure Michael's right. Looks good. Yeah, I think that was a good comment. I don't have any additional comments.
Okay,
I'm glad we're protecting our students.
okay. Is there any public comment on this first reading? We will not be taking any action. You go ahead, Chuck.
Yeah, on the board policy, when you get down to that paragraph, the superintendent designee shall notify parents, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Then it gets down to immigration status or religious beliefs. I think if we're throwing in religious beliefs, we ought to be a little more inclusive and throw in race, ethnicity, gender, language.
Chuck, where are you?
Yeah, I need to open up my
Okay,
laptop.
You're on the board policy, right?
Yeah, I got the board
Yeah.
policy. It said, "The superintendent or designee shall notify parents/guardians regarding their children's right to a free public education, regardless of immigration status or religious beliefs." And I think it should be more inclusive than just religious beliefs.
Yeah, I like that too.
You know,
Chuck.
I mean,
That's good.
yeah, I think, there's discrimination on a lot of things beyond religious beliefs that we ought to be, make note of.
And I assume you got that, Mary, and then Wes, would you like a comment on
Yeah,
that?
just, Valerie didn't hear the question. I think, I hear Mr. Ford's concern, and I think it's in the right place to do all we can. I believe that language, which is much more inclusive of other protective classes, is in our non-discrimination and harassment policy, which we did last February or so. This one speaks, and it has a ed code reference, the 234.7. I'm not sure what exactly that ed code says, but this policy is specifically related to immigration. So I don't know that it would hurt to put that language in. I'm just saying that we do have language in other board policies that accomplish exactly the same thing, the same protections that you were talking about.
Can we make reference in this text then, in this revised text, to that that policy that we already have? Could that reside also in this document?
Yeah, such as next to the other board policies that are cited, like the access to district records.
I feel
Yes.
like,
So the
after hearing what Wes just said, why is religious belief in that clause at all then, if we're just talking about immigration status in this policy?
Well,
Muslim ban?
I think
Muslim
I think this one comes directly out of what I tried to do with my comment was to make sure that what we were adopting was consistent with the statute that they said was the source for this. So if you look at Education Code Section 234.7, this is the governing board or body of a local educational agency shall do both of the following. One, provide information to parents and guardians as appropriate regarding their children's right to a free public education regardless of immigration status or religious beliefs. And then it goes on and says things that are not relevant to this particular issue. So we could add something, but it wouldn't be grounded in the statute.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether there's any downside.
And religious beliefs are mentioned specifically in the AB 699, which is what mandates this new policy.
Where are they mentioned? Religious beliefs?
I can't hear.
AB
Where?
699.
In the statute
In
that
this-
was passed in the legislation that was passed.
Correct.
But that's what's in the education code now. Right?
Yes.
That's what I'm reading from.
Yeah.
Right, AB 699 became Education Code Section 234.7 in part.
Yes, that's the Assembly bill that mandates that we put this in place, and
Oh,
then,
I see.
yeah. But the Assembly bill mentions specifically the different classes of protection that we have to put in here. And then CSBA translates that into
Yeah, yeah.
the ed code, or the board policy.
why, frankly, even religious beliefs
Yeah.
should be in here, since it's all about immigration status, that there must have been.
Right, and we don't collect that information formally or informally.
I can certainly check into the background on that,
Yeah.
if you'd like more
That might be a
information.
good way to go from here. I don't,
I
yeah,
can do that.
yeah. And Mary got
This isn't
the,
asking us to collect the information. This is asking the district to advise parents and guardians of their rights.
Of their rights.
Right, and that's what the statute says, so. I don't know, Chuck, that's the additional information.
might be good, I think,
We'll
as
bring back-
Valerie
we'll give you
suggested.
more background.
Yeah, for the next
Yeah,
reading.
just look at it.
Yeah,
See
it'd be
what-
great.
Okay.
See what you think. Thank you. Any public comment on that item? We're not taking any action? Thank you. We'll move on. And the next item is Mr. Christensen, Lars Christensen, approve agreement between the district and California School Employees Association, CSEA Chapter 549.
Good evening, Dr. Pitts, President Harlander, and Governing Board. As you're aware from previous closed session conversations, we have settled with the California School Employees Association, our local chapter, Chapter 549. I want to acknowledge Tim Mullery and his team for the good work at the table over the course of the past number of months. I appreciate Tim being here this afternoon or evening. As you can well imagine, he's been busy getting Redwood ready to open in just a few days. Anyway, we respectfully request that the board approve the agreement with CSEA. I want to let you know that per requirement, CSEA, both the regional and state office, have approved our agreement via their 610 process, and it's been ratified by their membership group. So the final step in the process is board approval, and we respectfully ask that you do that this evening. And I and Tim are available for questions if you have any.
Any board members have questions on this item? As you noted, it was a closed session item, and you're bringing it now to the full board.
Yep.
Is there any public comment on this item? Mimi Willer, would you like to come to the podium?
Mimi Willer from Kentfield. I would just like to draw attention to the fact that the top management of the district, the 31 FTEs, that they have increases that are shadow or linked to the CISA. Is that how it's pronounced?
CSEA?
CSEA contract. And I would encourage you to think about whether, given the district's financial difficulties right now, whether that linkage should be frozen for the moment, which is to say that the top people in the district maybe ought not to get the percentage increases that are in that contract. Because I think that management should be participating in in whatever hardship there is within the district. Similarly, I would question whether it might be appropriate for there to be a plan developed to reduce the 31.0 FTEs to some other number. I know that there have been some job consolidations, but if the board would think about maybe 31 should be 29, that would potentially be saving a few $100,000 a year, which is meaningful relative to the district's deficit. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. So if there's no other comment, can I have a motion to approve the agreement between TUHSD and California School Employees Association, Chapter 549?
Can I just respond to Mimi for a second?
No,
No, okay.
it's our meeting that's in public, and we're trying to get into that habit a little bit more for the school year. Thank you. But what you can request is for the superintendent to follow up with her later. Sorry.
I move that we accept the agreement, approve the agreement between TUHSD and CSEA Chapter 549.
Is there a second?
I second it.
A second.
And this is a roll call vote, Mary?
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Butterman
Aye.
and Ms. Harlander.
Aye. Thank you, that passed, and
Thank you very much, and on behalf of CSEA, thank you.
great, thank you. And I think, Valerie, you can work with Chuck. I think we probably can anticipate what you're going to explain and follow up with Mimi Willard. Thank you. The next item is budget update and approve revisions, and we have Corbett.
Right.
Thank you. Corbett Elson. I'll give you your full name here.
Appreciate that. And good evening, everyone, again. I'm going to provide a brief budget update with some revisions, some positive news, and an update on some changes we made as a team to begin the school year, and to talk about a process of how we're going to work with our community to look at our budget situation and to work together with our community to come up with a plan to address that. So first off, EDCO requires that whenever there's a material budget revision or a budget update, that we come to the board within 45 days with an update. And good news is that the state legislature enacted the state budget, and that provides some positive news. There for mandated costs, there's a rebate for that and an additional revenue of roughly $900,000 as listed in the agenda. That is being brought to you now because at the May revision from the governor's proposal, that was an unknown. So we don't bring that forward until it's enacted by the legislature. So Mary, if you go to this MYP update, that is shown here in blue. The updates are from the June adopted budget that you guys approved. So if you look in blue in the top left for 2018-19, you'll see state revenue. That shows an additional increase of roughly $900,000 we received that's per ADA. So roughly 5,000 students times a one-time money in the footnotes in the bottom, $185 per ADA, adds an additional $900,000 there. So that is positive news. That does require a recommendation for approval that I'm recommending. We'll come back to that in a couple of moments. The other update from the June adopted budget that you guys approved is now that we've officially approved the CSA tentative agreement, that we now have updated the salary increases for all members of the district, TFT, CSA, and management. So that's highlighted in expenses in blue for certificated salaries, classified salaries, and benefits, which roughly add up in total to $800,000. The net of those two changes, the one-time money from the state and the salary increases, is a net of an increase of $100,000. So if I could pause for a moment, see if there's any questions about that before I talk about additional updates.
Laura, we're taking a short pause. Do you have any questions before Corbett continues? I didn't know if you heard him ask that question.
Yeah, I heard. I would love to see this spreadsheet, whatever you're looking at, when I'm back, or send it to me. But I like that we're net plus 100,000. That's great.
Thank you. So go ahead, Corbett.
Welcome. Great. And then continuing, I'm going to be coming back and trying to provide regular updates to the board on where we stand as we try to work through this situation. A couple of updates. Mary, would you mind going back to the board agenda item, if you would? A couple updates we've been talking about as a cabinet and management team of how we need to be proactive and look at every opportunity to try to drive cost savings given the situation we're at. So I want to highlight a few things under financial impact. Given my change and the changes behind, the way it's been done is that there's going to be a savings of roughly $151,000 per year. That's ongoing savings. That's roughly 0.7 FTE of a management team member. Partially that's because the general fund is what you saw in the MYP, whereas adult education, Fund 11, is funded separately. So that's our new director, Jamie Nash. So I want to highlight that savings of $151,000. That is not shown in the MYP that you've seen yet. That will show up at the first interim budget report in December. Additionally, last Tuesday we met as a management team to provide a similar update of where we're at financially from where we were in the spring when people went away from the summer through June, adopted budget. Gave everyone that update, talked through it thoroughly so people could understand the situation we're in. We talked about it as a management team and said, what can we do proactively now? Not wait till later, but now. And we talked about how with our school site budgets and our department budgets, clarifying district department budgets, IT, nutrition, community education,
maintenance operations. We want to try to reduce those budgets right away to recoup savings throughout the course of the year. So the school site budgets with the principals we discussed and are enacting a 25% reduction of all school site budgets. That adds up to almost exactly $300,000 annually. And the district department budgets, again, IT, M&O, nutrition, et cetera, roughly $150,000. That's going to take a little bit of time to go through department by department to see what's committed and what can be reasonably brought back. So that $150,000 is a little bit more rough. In addition, lastly, what's not on there is we've worked with our site teams to identify that any unused funds from last year that were unspent, we're not going to be reallocating them back to the sites. We're going to bring that back to the district to offset our operating deficit. We don't have a number on that. We'll know in September when we close the books. I want to clarify that has nothing to do with any scholarships, any fundraising efforts. That will all stay back at the sites. This is district money that was allocated, that was unused. Therefore, it's going to come back and offset our operating deficit. So just a couple examples of, I just want to highlight how we're trying to be proactive even before we start the school year, look at every opportunity as they arise to see what makes sense in terms of savings while maintaining the effective programs we have. So before I talk about our budget reduction calendar, are there any questions or comments about that? Okay. Mary, would you mind posting the updated budget development calendar, please? One thing I want to point out that this is a slight update from what was posted on Friday. We had some refinements on Monday yesterday, so I just want to highlight this is slightly different from what you've seen. Some of those changes are in bold and some slight changes. Again, we're trying to be proactive and thoughtful about the challenge we have in front of us and the conversations we need to have given our financial situation. So this is just a calendar of the upcoming fiscal year of key dates, conversations, discussions, presentations that we need to have. I'm not going to take the time to read all the way through this for you, but I do want to highlight just a couple of key dates. As you've heard, we're forming our Fiscal Advisory Group. They're going to meet in August 27th, later this month. Their first meeting, a broad group of, I believe, is it 17 stakeholders, I believe, that are going to begin with a budget presentation of school budget basics. So they understand the basics of what school finance is about and the situation we're in. We're going to be giving presentations to all our various stakeholders. I've scheduled meetings with principals to visit school sites at staff meetings to give a presentation in detail of what's the situation we're in. We're going to talk to our employee groups, our labor association leaders, our foundations, our general community members. We've already talked about our administrative team. Our partners at MCOE are going to be heavily involved in supporting us throughout this. So that's going to pick up very quickly at the end of this month and into September. Maybe not scrolling down. Leading into October, as the Fiscal Advisory Group gets formed, they're going to be pushed pretty quickly to begin working on some potential recommendations, potentially to the superintendents for consideration. One potentially with the passage of the parcel tax and one without. We need to be mindful of that and have some of those thoughts and conversations ahead of time, which would lead obviously to November. The parcel tax election is obviously a very important date. And then lead into December when the first interim budget report of this year's budget will be provided, and that will include the results of the parcel tax election and all the changes we've been talking about since June in the multi-year projection. Some of the updates I talked about will be shown in December, and of course anything else that happens throughout the remainder of the fall. I'm not going to get into the new fiscal year, but I just want to highlight a couple of key dates and let you know we're thinking about this very proactively.
The Fiscal Advisory Group, it seems like a large group. And how do you plan to harness that many stakeholders? Are you going to take all their individual recommendations and so that you have a range of recommendations and you choose from those? Or can you speak to that a little bit?
Valerie, do you mind if I hand this off to you since you'll be chairing it with Lars and I?
I think that the key here is careful process planning, agenda planning, with processes that work to bring people to consensus and giving people a very clear understanding of what their role is in advisory capacity. So talking from the very beginning about how decisions will be made in in the group. And working, with a group of 17, it is hard. It's hard to come to consensus, but there are strategies that you can use as a facilitator to encourage that. We will be bringing things to the committee. We will be asking for feedback. We will be developing activities in the hour and a half or two that we meet with the committee, and we have quite an aggressive committee schedule between now and December that is proactive in terms of hearing from everyone, but potentially in small groups with report outs, potentially using strategies that I'm sure you've all used before in groups with dots and sticky notes and prioritizing things and grouping things. We don't have to do the nitty-gritty work in a committee meeting. Staff can bring back the result of that to the next meeting to keep things moving along. In addition, there are several things that will be happening at the sites too, concurrently. We want to make sure, and Corbett is going to be emphasizing this when he goes to the sites and provides these presentations, that voices are heard via input that they can be giving Corbett at those presentations, and other input that they can give through either their department meetings or through their faculty meetings to the principals, who then bring that to us in management team meetings, which in turn comes back to the larger fiscal advisory committee. So it's not just the fiscal advisory committee that is dealing with this. We're going to be seeking input from all of the various groups that are currently in existence.
I know you know this already, so you're probably wondering why I say it. I think that it's just always such a challenge, and we've come for everyone, that sometimes these committees, people leave thinking that the organization just checked the box, but the way you described it, it sounds pretty thorough and thoughtful and well planned out. So I'm pleased that you're taking that approach, and it doesn't sound like you're just having meetings. You really have reasonable, achievable goals. I guess that's the question. Is this achievable?
It's aggressive.
Yeah.
Our goal is aggressive for the year and for the out years, and some of that depends on the success of the parcel tax. And there are checks and balances. For instance, the meetings that are held twice a month. Corey, I'm looking at Corey. Bi-monthly, twice a month. I mean every other month. Twice a month, which are issues meetings. But a check and balance could
Bi-monthly
come up
is every 2
other
months.
I know.
Semi-monthly is
Semi-monthly.
twice a month, so I don't know what it is.
Twice a month.
Twice a month. If during those meetings, things might come up, there was a misunderstanding, we feel like this is top down, we're going too fast. Those are things, we want to be paying attention to as we facilitate this group.
Okay. I see Michael Futterman.
I just want to make one small comment. First of all, thank you for the, sort of the laying out the plan. Thank you, Valerie. You weren't, I don't think, Corbett, around the table, were you, when we were having our LCAP Fiscal Advisory Committee meetings last year?
I was not.
Okay, so I'm sure you've had a lot of feedback about what went well and what some of the challenges were. But there will be a continuing challenge of bringing the members of the committee who are less well-informed about district operations and district budgets and sort of where the opportunities are for savings to bring them along and into the conversation. It's a big challenge. Somebody like you or Valerie or Corey or Tim or whoever else is sitting at the table has got years of experience and just understands what's going on. And for those who are, it was a source of frustration the last time, I think, for some of the parents in particular. And so even if you do Budget 101, one big topic is how does school finance work, which is
Absolutely.
not intuitive, right? And then there's this other huge topic of, okay, but how does it really work on the ground here, in the district? So I know that's a challenge. I'm not telling you anything that you know. I'm just kind of reinforcing it because it's going to, if we really want to have meaningful input from community members, we're going to need to really bend over backwards to make sure that we're educating them and making them feel comfortable in expressing their opinions.
I'll just add, while I wasn't in the fiscal advisory groups, we've spent a great deal of time the last 3 weeks debriefing that experience, what went well, what did not, clarifying the need to communicate proactively, early, clearly. I think that's part of my role, is to do that with integrity, honesty, and patience. To your point, it is a challenge to explain it. And that's the first meeting we're going to lead off with. We're going to have a joint LCAP and fiscal advisory group for the first meeting. And the whole point is to lead with that, to begin that journey of getting understanding. But I know very well it's going to take some time, and I'm going to be available to follow up with individuals as needed or as much as possible to do that. But I think, as Valerie mentioned, we're going to be leaning in proactively, clarity of decision-making, what are the goals, and having the meetings as early as often. But that's part of my role, and something I'm taking seriously moving forward is an important piece.
So the budget, the MYP, as currently drafted and presented here tonight, it hasn't changed that daunting figure of $6 million of budget cuts. On whatever it says, unidentified budget cuts.
The
right.
green line, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So if by way of process you'd rather not answer this question now, I'm okay. But given the fact that you're going to proceed with this committee on two assumptions: one, that the parcel tax passes; one, that the parcel tax doesn't pass. My understanding is that this $6 million figure is for if the parcel tax does not pass. Have you got a figure that you're going to give the committee for scenario, the other scenario, which is if it does pass?
I'm not prepared to share that tonight. We've talked about those scenarios, and I want to make sure we talk thoroughly with Dr. Pitts and Dr. Buster and Cabinet. But we talked about that exact scenario, looking at our operating deficit, the gray line going horizontally, what that means. So that's the part of the conversation we need to get to. What's the target with the parcel tax passing or without? So that goes hand in hand to your point. But you're alluding to the fact that the green line, this MIP does not show any parcel tax passage. So you're right. This plays out the scenario without it passing. Therefore, those numbers in the green line are larger. So we'll come back to that, and that's something. Once I get direction, I'll come back in these board meetings with an update on that. And again, to help track what's the progress being made to date towards that target.
Very
Yeah,
good.
comment?
Thank you. Go ahead, Barbara.
I just have to comment about the clarity of the communication and the narrative here. I've been around this business for a while, and still facing the budget for the first time, for me to really have to look through it, not only daunting, but just archaic in trying to understand it. And your ability to, based on the fact that I think you're an excellent math teacher, and it's at that level with which you understand how to communicate, when to change it up, and to read your audience and to come prepared. And this is so encouraging because it means we can see our plan ahead, we can see what we have to do together, and we can see what our roles are and the contributions we can all make. And I appreciate this level of clarity and expertise.
Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you, Barbara. Laura, do you have any comment? I know you don't see it as well, but you'll like it when you get back.
Yeah, I don't see it at all. I know I'm going to see it eventually. I just had a question about the status of the LCAP and Fiscal Advisory Committees that are listed on this Budget Development and Deficit Reduction Plan calendar. I know that the invitation to apply has been sent out. I'm wondering if anyone can tell the board if we've been inundated with applications, or how those two committees are looking at this point in terms of filling the slots.
Well, we anticipate the LCAP committee will be filled with many of the same people that was on it last year. We have 4 or 5 applications in so far, interest for the Fiscal Advisory Committee. And several of the positions on the Fiscal Advisory Committee are already spoken for. So 4 or 5 is not inundated, but it's a good start.
Chuck.
Okay, and when, I know that at one board meeting, we talked about the Fiscal Advisory Committee needing to get together pretty quickly and start doing the work. When is the first meeting?
August 27th.
Oh, okay. That might be up there somewhere. I didn't see it. Thank you.
Chuck, do you have any
That's
comment? Okay. Before we vote on the budget update, do we have any public comment on the budget update? To approve, yes. Thank you.
Mimi Willard again. Two comments. Number one, relative to the presentation here on the adopted budget adjusted for one-time revenue, et cetera. It's very well presented. I do note that, as I have seen with other budget documents, both in this district and in other districts, it would be there's a column here that I would like to see that's not here, and that is what were the numbers for each of these rows of line items in the last discussed or last proposed budget, so that we can see what's the impact that you told us verbally, but can we just see how they work through line by line? That would be super helpful on an ongoing basis. And I think it'd help the board, too, to understand what's changed, what's new, what's different, how do these pieces fit together. Separately, I will just chime in and say that as far as the Fiscal Advisory Committee is concerned, 19 is a lot of people. And I understand what the dynamics are within the district of the need to have every group that gets a seat at the table have a seat at the table. But I'm really pretty concerned that, well, I don't know exactly what you want to accomplish with it, but if you're looking for input for ways that you might do a better job fiscally, I don't think 19 people in a room is productive. And I don't know that I would apply for that just because it's a huge time commitment, and if I don't think it's productive, then it's hard to justify. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. And Valerie, maybe you could follow up with any clarification. And we have Tim.
How's it going?
Okay.
Tim Mullery, CSEA President. I guess I'm going kind of on a sidebar tangent of LCAP and Fiscal Advisory, but I just want to make sure that classified is represented in the paperwork that goes out to those committees. We were not part of that at all last year, and more pertaining to teachers and psychologists and stuff. I just want that to be a focus because there's going to be a lot of tough decisions that need to be made, and we need people to understand the role that we play as well.
Thank you for that comment. Thank you. Okay, no further comments. So can I ask for a motion to approve the budget update and approve the revisions that were just presented?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you, and this is a roll call vote.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Owens?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Futterman?
Aye.
And Ms. Harlinger?
Aye. Thank you, that passed. So now's the time for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. And at this time, members of the public may address the board on topics that are under the jurisdiction of the board and are not on the agenda. Although the board by law may not take action on any comments at this meeting. The board respects the right of members of the public to speak to us regarding matters within the jurisdiction of the board. However, it is important for members of the public to recognize that comments regarding students other than the speaker's own children made during the public board meeting may be legally actionable as a violation of student policy. Both state and federal law prohibit the board and others from discussing confidential student information in open session. Furthermore, it is important for the public to understand that negative or derogatory comments made against district employees or others, even those made in a public board meeting, may be actionable civil defamation. As such, the board reminds the public that the district has existing board policy that allows the public to lodge a complaint against a district employee. This policy provides a comprehensive procedure for reviewing and responding to public complaints. This process provides a more thorough opportunity to be heard than is allowed under the open meeting law that governs this meeting. So with that, are there any public comments? Thank you. If you could identify yourself.
Of course.
Thank you. And Mary, could you please start the timer? Thank you. Or be ready to. Thank you. Great. Thank you.
Ava Crisanti. Since June of 2017, I've been fighting the district's resegregation of the Tam High Pool. I want to respond to Valerie Pitt's latest email to me, but since I want to start on a positive note, I'll first direct you to an award-winning article by Kevin Dawson in the Journal of American History. The article demonstrates that through the 19th century, the swimming and diving ability of Africans surpassed that of Europeans. Not only were the first swimming competitors on U.S. soil enslaved African Americans, but what we now call the freestyle stroke is actually a coastal African technique brought to the Americas by slaves. Thus, the old, false Marin County claim for limiting or blocking access for black children to private swim teams and now for equal access to the Tam High Pool, that false claim, which as late as 2017 was being made by several Strawberry Seals parents, that false claim that blacks can't swim, don't like to swim, or are somehow just inherently poor swimmers, is easily disproved not only by Dawson's research, but by our own experiences with over 5 decades of racially integrated open swim at Tam High before the district ended the practice in 2013 after constricting black children's access for over a decade. If you doubt the history of African American aquatic skills, ask yourself why Harriet Tubman sang "Wade in the Water" as a direct instruction to slaves to escape to rivers and waterways. It's because black swimming skills surpassed that of white slave owners and white slave catchers. The paucity of swimming skills among African Americans today is due to one factor: the 20th century history of whites restricting access to public swim facilities, a restriction that is now normalized in Southern Marin. A total failure to understand this history is exactly what your employee, Ann Jaime, demonstrated last October 10 when she claimed that racially integrated open swim ended as a direct result of a drowning death in one of the district pools. Her claim used manipulative, charged language, referring to the racially integrated period as a, quote, free-for-all, end quote, insanity. The fact that the video has apparently been removed from your website raises questions. Most obvious to attorneys who reviewed the district's correspondence, including Valerie Pitt's August 10 email, is a consistent lack of evidence for any of the district's defensive claims. On August 10, Pitts reversed the district's prior statement, writing Jaime's claim was substantiated, but that the, quote, near drowning was, quote, an accident. Per Pitts, Ms. Jaime's statement about the accident was substantiated, unquote. Where's the evidence for this? Later, Pitts claims, quote, we do not divulge information about individuals for privacy reasons. Well, clearly that is not the case given the, quote, information district employee Ann Jaime announced publicly on video, which I saved. Further, if you're claiming the individual passed away, it is a matter of public record, so produce the documents. Similarly, the costly investigation by Atkinson Andelson has been kept under wraps. On a regular basis, the board announces that the investigation cleared them, but coyly declines to show us the report. At the last board meeting, the only attorney on the Board of Trustees, Michael Futterman, defended Ann Jaime, raising even more questions about the board's judgments.
Public
Futterman's
comment is
statement
now
that
over.
Ann Jaime was a valued
Fellow
teacher
board members, we're going
and
to
that she had
recess
taught
for a
all
moment.
of our
Please get up and leave
parentheses,
with me.
white
Thank
children.
Agenda, actually, and pull the items. I'm not saying this quite clearly. The first item on the consent agenda that we wanted to bring forward was 16A, approve minutes of the July 17th, 2018 Board of Trustee meeting. And that was actually my request, and I think, Chuck, you had a comment as well, but with mine, they were just, it was very minor clerical and had to do with consistency with the use of the name, or my name, and so it's gotten complicated with the Lundgren-Harlander regime. So Mary's made those changes, and that'll be shown on the next agenda. So Chuck, did you want to share with Mary what your concerns
my
were?
changes just had to do with, it had the thing about the youth court, it was actually the Marin Youth Commission.
Okay, did you?
And I wrote it in there.
And I will make those changes. Want me to read it?
Would you like to read it? Not really? Okay, I can tell I'm reading your face. So this is the protocol part. So we're going to still vote to approve it with those changes. So can I have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 17th with the changes that we've noted?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor? This is a roll call vote. No, it's not? It's not. I take it back. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. That carried.
Aye.
Oh, Laura, thank you.
Yeah.
So the so
I'm still here.
okay. We didn't take the phone with us when we recessed. Yeah. Okay, so I do want to make a note here. I do appreciate that we have that Laura has Eiffel, and I'm sorry, I hope I pronounced your last name right. I didn't, did I? Okay, maybe when you come up you can clarify it. I think I just realized I said it incorrectly. There's a number of items, and we do want to hear your comment. And it's going to be very tempting for the board to respond, but we're not going to be able to respond. But we will take it, and if the superintendent wishes to respond, you're welcome to for clarification. Part of this is that we have to really avoid getting into a discussion with because it's not a community meeting. So, but we do want to hear what you have to say, and there likely will be a follow-up, but we will not be having a discussion. Just don't want you to think that we're not taking what you say seriously. But we do want to hear. Again, it goes back to this is a board meeting in public, not a community meeting. So for the first one, approved contract for chief financial officer. Can you come to the podium and provide your comment? Or Mimi, thank you.
So this is item 16G.
Yes, 16G, approved contract for chief financial officer.
I'll make this super efficient. I'll make 3 comments, 3 different items all at once in under 3 minutes. So we have on the agenda today the proposed contracts for 3 members.
We're just doing G right now. We literally do each one separately. We don't,
Okay.
yeah, so we're doing chief financial officer.
Well, I don't want to have to say the same thing 3 times, so for your...
We'll bear with you.
Okay. In this contract, there is a provision for what happens if there is a termination of the chief financial officer.
Mhm.
And that provision involves basically the payment, regardless of whether it's for cause or not for cause, a payment of 12 months salary plus health care benefits continuation. And I would suggest that, and this is in no way a comment on the abilities of the person in this position or the other people who are in parallel positions to that, but just to refer to what's going on within the community. There has, as you know, been a lot of public discussion and some dismay over the payout of Dr. Yoshihara's contract when he departed as superintendent and then turned around and immediately had another job, so that it appears to the community that we have a district here that's in financial difficulty that ended up giving a departing employee a financial windfall. Now, I understand in all likelihood that was in his contract, so that's not your fault. But as we come up to new contracts with a similar structure, it does kind of become the onus on you for approving those contracts. And I would suggest that you might want to table those contract approvals as a board for consideration and just a little more discussion over the next 2 weeks or 4 weeks, whatever. And maybe consider, for example, adding a clawback provision if, for example, a terminated employee is then re-employed within 12 months, that you don't have to pay out that full amount. because I understand those clawbacks are there for their benefit, particularly since there's a hiring one-year schedule typically for when the window opens for said person to find another job. But that might be something that's fiscally prudent, or alternatively having a shorter period of a payback. And then also, I would just reiterate my prior comment that increases tied to CSEA, maybe you don't need to have them on the higher priced employees.
Okay.
Thank you.
So if any board members want to discuss, if this spurred any thought that you want to discuss with the other board members, or ask Valerie a clarifying question or anything, you're welcome to now. Otherwise,
Yeah, I would, just as a matter of, with respect to the issue of, the specific issue of whether the agreement requires the payment of compensation in the event that termination is for cause, that's not the way I read the agreement. The way I read this agreement under Section 9.2 is that Section 9 allows for termination of the agreement has a term. Right?
Correct.
A defined term.
Right.
And as I read the agreement under Section 9, there are various, it articulates alternative circumstances under which the agreement can be terminated. So, for example, 9.1 says upon mutual consent of the parties. So the way I read this is if this agreement is terminated by mutual consent, there's no provision, for example, for payment of compensation. Similarly, if 9.3, if there's a resignation, there's no provision for compensation. If it's at the end of the term, similarly, and I think frankly for cause, 9.5, I don't think we do need, there's no compensation provision if it's terminated for cause. Although I would observe that cause is not defined here. But it would be some kind of breach of the agreement. However, 9.2, as I read this, addresses the issue of, effectively, it's at the district's option if we determine it's the best interest of the district. And I think that the way I read the third section is no cause need be alleged. In other words, the district always has the option to terminate this for cause, provided that it pays out whatever this formula is, the lesser of 12 months or whatever's remaining on the contract. So I know I'm not allowed to respond directly to,
but you're looking at me, so it's
to
good.
Mimi, and I'm looking at you.
You're
but
doing
I know
really
that,
well.
I know that a member of the public happens to be in the room. But I don't read the contract in the same way. If 9.5 included a provision for compensation on termination for cause, then I would agree that would be problematic. But I don't read it this way.
Thank you. So I'm going to ask for a vote, someone to provide a motion to approve the contract for the Chief Financial Officer.
I move we approve the employment agreement for the Chief Financial Officer.
Do we have a second?
I second it.
All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. That passed. Thank
Do we
you.
need a roll call since I'm way over here in Wisconsin, or is it just good to say aye?
On
We
the
heard you
consent
loud and
agenda,
clear.
I don't think we need a
Yeah,
roll call for
yeah,
this, do
and we heard you very clear.
Okay.
I think it's when you have bad connection. So let's move on to the approve amended contract for Assistant Superintendent Educational Services. Can you also pronounce your last name for me?
Laura Effel.
Effel. Okay, thank you.
Yes, and I live in Larkspur. I know that this employee is a valued employee, or you wouldn't be offering him a contract at all. But that's not the reason to object to this. You did get a lot of adverse publicity over the payout for Dr. Yoshihara's contract. And regardless of the reason, this will not play well in a campaign for a parcel tax. The fact that you've entered into an agreement with the union, which implies certain increases for management does not mean that you have to go with that completely. You can even modify your own decision without irritating the union if you decide to hold off on some of these management contracts. And I assure you that this will not play well in that parcel tax campaign. But also, I have heard from other people in the county that this district has a reputation for not being very well managed and for paying too much and giving too many benefits. And that's not going to play well either. So I think that this is something that will damage your ability to make that parcel tax get passed. And I hope not to see that happen. I think that actually, if this is, well, this is, as you know, as I've already acknowledged, an employee that you value, but he's not going to starve if he doesn't get a contract in the next few months. It would be good to have the new superintendent in place, as well as having the parcel tax, in order to reevaluate these contracts. And I urge you to do that.
Thank you, Mimi.
I'm probably going to butcher this, but I just want to mention that Laura's Effel's professional expertise is in this area, this field of which she just addressed. And I'm just going to repeat for the record, because we're on to the second employee with a contract here. I apologize if I misspoke or misread in some way the proposed contract relative to fired for cause or not for cause, but I don't think that's the issue. I think the issue is the one that Laura just brought up, which is that there's a great deal of community sensitivity right now to the notion of administration being well paid out if they depart. And this is at a time when you are looking for support for the parcel tax, and I think you have an opportunity here right now to either defer a contract, because as we know, teachers have worked for long periods of time without new contracts, and of course, as part of that process, to consider, maybe you decide not to, but to give more serious consideration to some kind of clawback provision, or anything else that you think would provide some greater assurances to the community that you're being very thoughtful about this issue. Thank you. I think that the community that's watching this is twofold. It's the voters who are going to approve or not approve your parcel tax, but it's also your rank and file employees, and you're going to really need good morale from them through this process, where they're looking at cuts in their supplies budgets and possible consolidation of positions, or reduction of programs and so on. So again, the optics here are really more than optics. They're substantive. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from any board members?
I have a question. What's the percentage increase in salary in the management contracts with respect to the two assistant? Well, I know that Corbett's is a new contract. He hasn't been in that position before, but with respect to Lars and Tara,
1.5%.
1.5%.
Like everybody else.
Right.
Laura, do you have any comment?
No.
Thank you.
You know, I guess I would just say that I appreciate the input from our speakers. They've been very attentive at participating at meetings and making thoughtful comments and so forth. And I can't frankly say, I'm not a political prognosticator. I can't really say how these two particular agreements are going to be interpreted. I don't think that 1.5% at these dollars is fiscally significant. I do understand the symbolism associated with it. I would say that, we actually operate in a pretty lean, as I understand it, given the increases in our hiring that we've done to take into account the enrollment growth that we've had at the teacher level. We actually don't have more, as I understand it, we don't have more administrative staff than we did 10 years ago when this started. And we are really operating in many ways closer to, relative to our student population, closer to the bone than we have been, than we were, again, before this sort of, these last 10 years of enrollment growth have started. If you look at just the numbers that we have, we actually operate, for example, with fewer assistant principals than is recommended in light of the size of our student population. That's just one example. So I would say that we have challenges in terms of getting out our story with respect to how we manage the district. I think that some of the publicity that's been out there has been incomplete and is, I think, I think the story out there is a little bit misleading, but of course it's our job to get the story out, and we recognize it. But I think that looking overall at what we've done administratively, I actually don't think we're being profligate. I don't think we overpay. And I do think, frankly, that with some of the turnover that we've had in the superintendent's position, that we've relied more and more on our assistant superintendents who've done, frankly, really, really strong work, and have taken on added responsibilities. And so I think and I think in part, this is intended to recognize the really high quality work that we get from these folks. So I do understand the symbolism. I think it's going to be incumbent on us to tell our story. But I appreciate the input.
Can I ask for a motion, please?
Okay. Which one are we moving on?
I move to approve the amended contract for Superintendent Ed Services.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Now we move on to the amended contract for Assistant Superintendent, Human Resources. Do you have a comment about that as well? That's number I, 16I.
Just for the record, Amy Willard, I will repeat my same plea that I've made twice already tonight, which is that you table this contract for consideration until you have the opportunity to give further thought as to what you want, whether you might do something that would resonate better with the community relative to the buyout provisions under the termination clause.
Thank you.
Laura Effel again. Since you've already approved Mr. Christensen's contract, I'm sure you're going to approve this one too, but the same issues apply, except that you certainly wouldn't want to discriminate on the basis of gender and deny her a contract. But I understand why you've gone along with Mr. Futterman's comments, but it is regrettable that you don't have a better story to tell with respect to these. You could have just postponed them both, and I don't think either of them would have suffered too much, but well, you have my comments. Thank you.
No, thank you. No, I assure you, we've looked at all these issues thoroughly and spent a lot of time weighing the pros and cons, and I think I'll leave it to Valerie to follow up with. And I thank you, Michael, you've provided a good part of what we've all discussed. Can I have a motion to approve the amended contract for Assistant Superintendent Human Resources? I hope I'm on the right one.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 So now we move on to J, approval of the public disclosure in accordance with AB 1200 and tentative agreement between Tamalpais Union High School District, CSEA, and Tamalpais Union High School District Management.
Laura Effel again. The only reason I asked to have this pulled out of the consent agenda was that it went along with the other contracts. And as I commented earlier, I thought you could delay or table the individual contracts with management without any serious disagreement with the union, but there are no additional comments on that particular item.
Thank you. Can I have a motion for the approval of the public disclosure and tentative agreement between the district CSEA and the district management?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Can I ask a question? I just want to make sure that the Corbett, the MYP that we saw earlier includes all these numbers baked into it?
Yes.
All employees at the 1.5%.
Thank you.
Should also note for the board's edification is that the public disclosure AB 1200 is a state requirement that we notify the County Office of Education of any settlements with our management organization, which is unrepresented, or our labor organizations. It's unrelated to the assistant superintendent and CFO contracts.
So we have a motion and a second. Can I ask for a vote then? All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you, that passed. And now we'll move on to item 16K, approved 2017-18 revised CSEA and confidential employee salary schedules. Pretty much the same? Okay. Can I ask for a motion then to approve the 2017-18 revised CSEA confidential employee salary schedules?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Now we're moving on to item 16N as in Nancy, approve the MOU with Gary Federoff for counseling at San Andreas High School. Mimi or Laura, did you want to comment on this contract? Okay. Can I ask for a motion to approve the MOU with Gary Federoff for counseling at San Andreas High School, please?
I have a question about this.
Mhm.
Was this person a service provider last year as well?
Mhm.
Yes.
Yes.
And how do these numbers compare to last year's numbers?
I might ask Corey's help with this. They're higher, but I'm not sure exactly what Gary's contract was last year.
Or 2 days a week.
2 days a week, so
And this is an increase in time.
an increase in time.
Jesus. Up to a maximum of.
Well,
It doesn't
so,
say-
So
I mean,
it's time, not hourly rate?
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. So, I mean, the gist of my question was, we had a service provider who was, a third-party service provider who, I think this was on an agenda a couple of meetings ago, who was asking
Right,
for an
right,
increase
right.
that was.
Oh, but not the same person, that was somebody
I know,
different.
it's not this
Yeah,
person,
yeah.
but that was in excess of, which we declined to provide because it was, frankly, it was in excess of the increases that we were providing to staff, and we thought that was inappropriate. So what you're saying here is that this is, I'd really like to know whether the rate.
It's not an increase in hourly rate at all, it's an increase in time.
No, it's moving from 2 days to 5 days.
And the reason for that is?
Student need. The offset, so you'll see in the MOU, 35,000 of that up to 80,000. And we received news today that assures us that it will not reach 80,000 because Mr. Fedorov he has other commitments and he can't work the hours that we put in the MOU here. So it will not be that much, but $35,000 comes from my student services budget. That is moving money from BACR, so we reduced BACR support at San Andreas, eliminated BACR support at San Andreas, and put that money towards the drug and alcohol counseling that Mr. Fedorov does. So it was a the same amount of money from the student services budget, but in discussions with David Luongo, the principal over there, Corey, we felt that money would be better spent addressing the substance abuse needs of the students at San Andreas. So that's going into the weeds a little bit about funding it, but to your basic question, he's getting the same amount per, he's at the same rate, it's just more.
Yeah, so you feel that the services that he provides better address the needs of our students than what BACR was providing. Okay, so, sorry, but you kind of opened the door to this.
Sure.
Right, when you said he's not going to be providing, he's not going to be available to provide up to, the time commitment that we're looking for. It's going to be something less than that, and that makes me wonder whether we ought to be approving an MOU that's based on an incorrect assumption, or whether we ought to have a lower number.
We could bring it back next week with a lower number. 2 weeks? Oh, okay, I don't want to show up by myself next week. 2 weeks with a lower number. And we just received that news today. He came in and spoke with us that he can only commit to about 2/3 of the time that this MOU reflects. And San Andreas, I don't want to speak for Corey, but San Andreas is eager to have whatever time they can.
Well, I don't want to delay him commencing services.
I don't either.
Right,
Yeah.
but on the other hand, I don't want to approve an agreement that allocates funds that are beyond what we ought to be allocating. So we could approve this with like direction to modify it right at a lower number.
We do like a provisional approval, and then I can come back in 2 weeks with a amended MOU.
Whatever we would need to do I don't want him to be unavailable because we haven't approved it. I want him to be available beginning on the first day of school, if that's what you guys believe is required, right? But right?
Well, right, and then,
So how do we
because
do that?
if you obligate funds and you don't have the funds you're not using to maybe shift to BACR, I assume, so we really do need to do a provisional approval with the
Yeah.
not to exceed value being accurate according to what he can commit
Don't
to.
take this as a disagreement with anything that anybody is saying. The MOU does say up to 80,000, so it's,
Yeah.
and it's based on a specific rate, so he would not be paid, he has to submit timesheets just like anybody else.
Still, as a
Yeah.
matter of budgeting, it probably,
How about if we approve it with the agreement that you come back and amend it with the lower amount?
Absolutely.
That way we approve it the way it is, they've come back when they are sure what the amount is, and do it that way.
That's just fine with me.
so moved.
Second?
Second?
Okay, I have a question. This gentleman is selling spelling of his name, is it Federoff or Oroff? It's spelled two different ways
Oh,
on
we
the
didn't see it.
agenda and on the MOU, and I want to make sure for the record that we have it spelled correctly.
Federoff.
We'll correct that.
Thank you, Laura. We'll correct that as well.
Thank you.
Did we get a motion? I can't remember. Did we?
Yes, we did.
I'm tired. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. And, dun-dun, I think meeting's adjourned. Thank you.